Hi all. I played in the Southend Open Congress over the long weekend, the Easter weekend, and I'm happy to report I did very well in it. I scored 5.5 out of 7. I came second equal and qualified actually for the British Championship, which I've never done before. Here is my last round game against D.Ledger, who's ECF 203 and has been over 200 for the last 10 years. He's a FIDE master. I was white. I played knight f3, the Reti system, which was played against me in a previous round, and I thought I'd give it a try myself. He played knight f6, and I transpose now into the English opening with c4. So one of the advantages of the Reti is that you can transpose it into various things, and that's why it's often referred to as a kind of chameleon opening, where it can change its colours or configurations to fit the opponent or what you feel like playing. He played e6, and now I played knight c3. I was expecting perhaps d5, but he played bishop b4. I thought this was an opportunity now to try and win the bishop pair from black. So I played first queen c2 because I didn't want to have any structural damage with my pawn structure. And also, you know, Kasparov has been playing queen c2 in the Nimzo Indian, so I thought, yeah, if it's good enough for Kasparov, it's good enough for me. So after castles a3, I was happy to get the dark squared bishop. And this dark square bishop on c1 proves to be a decisive piece later on, as we'll see. After b6, b3, I want to increase the pressure immediately on the diagonal. After bishop b7, bishop b2, d6. I was happy with my position now, but I was a bit concerned if I play a wrong pawn move here, such as d3. Let's have a look at this. If I play d3, maybe he's got e5. Pardon me. Rewind that. e5 here. Now if I continue with, say, e4, then c5, and now maybe knight c6 to d4, and I don't like this d4 square lock. So I wanted to stop him playing, first of all, that e5, so I played d4 here. After knight d7, I played e3. So I want my bishop to come to d3, and actually I'm strongly considering already just castling queenside. He plays knight e4, and I definitely want to castle queenside now, because I've seen too many games where black plays a later f5 and gets a massive kingside attack with ideas like rook f6 to h6 later if this pawn's on f5. So I really didn't want this to face an attack on the kingside. So I played queen c2, and after f5 bishop d3, as if I'm going to castle kingside, but now after queen e7, now I castle queenside. I think my king's safe enough for the moment. He plays a6, so already he's got some aggressive counter-attack planned with b5 to try and loosen my square control on the queen side and rip open my king. So I have to sort of counter-attack on the king side. One idea I had though was that this pawn on f5 could be used as a lever to rip open the g file if I ever got a g4 in. So that becomes my main plan now, to try and use that pawn on f5. First I play knight e1 to try and kick this knight on e4 with f3. He plays b5, so I kick the knight back. Well, first he plays b takes c4. So I take. He's weakened my a4 square though, which now becomes one of his next plans to exploit that a4 square. But first he retreats, of course, the knight. Now I play h3, so I want to play g4 to try and open the g line. Once the g line is opened, I have a target square of attack from this bishop and a rook, for example, on that g7 square. Bishop c6, so he's now preparing knight b6 to bishop a4. So it's do or die time for me here. I try and open the g file now. Knight b6, and now my last move had vacated this g2 square, so I thought I'd take opportunity to avoid this skewer, losing the exchange, and also move the queen to an aggressive square. I moved it to g2 now. And after bishop a4, I didn't really want to play rook d2, so I wanted to connect the rooks. So knight c2 seemed logical to me. So I connect the rooks. This rook can come to g1, or I can use that one for rook g1. But now bishop b3. So again, he's attacking me, and do I want to play a passive move like queen e2 when he's then got knight a4? I didn't really fancy that. So instead, first I do g takes f5, and he actually plays e takes f5 now. he didn't want to take on c4. According to Rybka, taking on c4 was actually better for black. Anyway, it's a different game. He played e takes f5, and here, after long consideration, I played a pawn sack. I just wanted to extend the power of this bishop, even at the cost of a pawn. So he won a pawn here, bishop takes f5, and now knight b takes d5. An interesting tactic I did observe at the time of the game is after knight fd5, I've got rook g1, which will be interesting in this position. And actually, if rook takes f5, queen takes g7, king f8, so that's not good enough. But here, in this position, there's also bishop e6 check, which I considered, which maybe is more dangerous for black. But actually, on Rybka analysis, it's fine as well. So maybe I was a pawn down objectively, but I have got some compensation with this powerful bishop. So he took with the knight on the b knight, and I played rook hg1, and he defended, made his king more solid with rook f7. Now here, I didn't want to play e4. Let's have a quick look, because knight f4, and I'm embarrassed now, because knight e2 check, winning the exchange. So I want to prepare e4 more safely, so I play queen g5. But now he offers the exchange of queens with knight e8. I really want to get this e4 in to play knight e3, and perhaps the knight can come to f5 later. So I play e4, allowing the trade of queens, because at least my bishop on b2 is preserved in this variation. I can double up rooks now. Well, after knight e3 first, bishop b3, rook dg1. I considered I had some pressure here for the pawn. After h6, I didn't want my rook stranded with rook h5. I think black just plays something like king f8 now to avoid any material loss, and the rook is just stranded. So instead I actually played it back to g3. After king f8, I now played h4. So I've got an idea of h5 to paralyze these pawns, but also maybe there's two threats now. Bishop d7s to put more pressure on that sensitive g7 square, and also bishop g6 if the pawn's there, which is what occurred in the game. So now after this sequence, bishop g6, and I get a fawn pawn, this dangerous fawn pawn, and I've removed one of the king's defenders now, that knight. So my knight can now come to f5. So I thought I was building up the strategic trumps in the position. Actually, in this position I thought I was winning the exchange, but then he played rook f6. So he's got this tactic of rook b1 check, exploiting the some pre-rook in this variation. So I just humbly retreat the knight back to e3 and let his rook escape to the e6 square. However, I was still okay here. I've got to try and increase the pressure. I thought a good way is to bring this rook in. So rook g4. After c6, rook f4 check. And after king g8, now knight f5. And I was really pleased with my position, because I thought there's all of a sudden some threats emerging, like bishop takes g7. Not in this position though, because of the rook b1 check. So after c5, I took the rook off that liability square, and I played rook g2, which also maybe threatens now bishop g7, simply winning that bishop, winning a pawn. He played bishop b3, but now there's another motive behind the brilliant move now, bishop takes g7. So I worked it out that at least there's a perpetual check. After knight takes g7, there's at least this perpetual check with, if now king h8, at the very least I can just repeat moves and secure a draw, which would be a good result because, you know, he's a higher rated player. After considerable thought though, I managed to find a combination here. I played rook h4, to which I think there's very little defence, and Rybka seems to agree with that. He played knight h5. It's no better than knight e8 because of the same destructive move now, which is to encourage a self-blockade. It's g7 check. The idea is not to mate the black king, but actually just win the knight back. So if knight takes g7, let's have a quick look. There'll be knight f5 check. And now if king g8, rook takes g7, and mate next move. King f8, rook here, mate. So he can't allow this, but it's all over. He plays king h7, and I just queen the pawn instead now, just winning the rook. But also there's this menacing pin now. This knight is pinned. He desperately just plays this hopeless move, and after f4 he's just totally overloaded here, and he allows me to deliver a final checkmate move with rook takes h5. So I was very pleased with this win. It secured me second equal at the Southend Open Congress, and a British Championship qualifier place may be offered to me officially soon, because Bob Eames, who won the tournament, doesn't want to take up his place apparently. So this has been one of my best tournaments this year so far, and one of my best games.